Let's get right to the seed saving, and Diane Ott Whaley joins us to talk a little bit about that. And Diane, it is wonderful to have you here in studio. So often when we get people of your designation, you know, we talk to them over the phone, but you're right here with us, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So how did you get the invitation to come to the Central Coast to speak on saving heirlooms?
Through a Seed Saver member, Elizabeth Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
I met her at the Heirloom Seed Exposition in Santa Rosa, California, this fall. And I had this fantasy trip in my mind. I wanted to come to this part of California because I'm based in Iowa. So Decorah, Iowa. So you can see where I'm going here.
Yes, especially this.
Yes.
A storm just went through.
I know. And so everybody here is complaining about the cold.
And you're thinking, you don't know.
No. You have no idea.
Yeah.
Right. And so during the warm season, the growing season, you have a beautiful farm that we are showing people who are watching online right now that is all heirloom varieties of seeds, correct?
It's all heirloom, open pollinated, or historic varieties of seed.
This is not something that you just started doing last week.
No, no, we didn't. It seems like it, but it's actually, my husband, Kent Whaley, and I started Seed Savers in 1975.
Wow.
So we were ahead of the game. Luckily we were, because we started saving, we were aware of heirloom varieties of seed disappearing.
Yeah.
When people immigrated to this country, when you look at the cover of that book, or I don't know if you're looking at any of the vegetables that we have, but when you think about it, when immigrants came into this country, they brought with them the seeds that they wanted to have when they came here, because they had no idea what they'd find.
Right.
So in that process, and I was inspired by my great-grandparents who brought seed over from Bavaria when they immigrated. A long story short, I was given some seed from my grandfather, and he soon passed away after that, and it was an heirloom variety of seed that his parents brought over from Bavaria. So when that happened, Kent and I thought, well, how often does that happen? People bring in the seeds, and unless there's someone to pass the seed on to, when that family disappears, the seed is lost, and how often that might happen. So we just, started networking people, not just, but we, so that's been the beginning of the evolution. So we started then with a handful of seeds, and now we have 24,000 different accessions of heirloom varieties in our seed collection.
Did you have any idea when you started what it would grow to be?
Quote unquote.
Right. How deep the roots would go.
Yeah, there's so many puns.
All, right?
No, I just came up with that one.
Okay. Very, very good.
I like that. Okay, good.
But we had no idea, but it's like a dream. I mean, you think about it and you keep the focus, and at the end of the day, all of a sudden we're here. Not all of a sudden either, but it was a wonderful journey. So many people joined us along the way. So we put this little feeler out there. Is anybody else saving seeds and wanting, to network with other gardeners? It started, there were people out there, and they were so happy to find each other. So we were networking closet seed savers. And so we started this network, and everybody was so happy to find each other. So it's a family as well as an organization.
This type of preservation really is, obviously you love it and it's your life work, but it really is a huge benefit to all of us.
Oh my gosh, yes, it is. I'm looking at all the beautiful things at the farmer's market these days, and they're all heirloom varieties of seed, and they're beautiful. And if we hadn't started this when we did, over 35 years ago now, who knows what we might have lost. And once a seed is lost, it's lost, and you can't regain the genetic value back. So,
what were those first seeds from your grandfather?
Yeah, they were a Morning Glory, called Grandpa Ott's Morning Glory, which is ironic because I see that all over in seed catalogs now. And even somebody sent me a seed packet of Grandpa Ott's Morning Glory that they picked up in Germany.
And those came from
those
your
came
seeds.
From my seeds.
From that
They came
handful of
back,
seeds.
Yes. And
Wow.
now they're back in Germany where they came from. But so it was a morning glory. And growing up, one of my memories of my grandparents, when we talk about food and gardening, I mean, that was important. That was their life. I mean, the garden was not a pleasure garden. It was survival.
Yeah.
So they had to grow everything. My grandmother's grocery list was flour, sugar, coffee, vinegar, salt. And the rest of it came from their land and from their hands and what
I
they
love
produced.
that.
Yeah, and so I didn't quite know at that time the importance of the garden, but I felt it, and I felt their love and their respect and their just genuine seriousness about their garden. So I came away with that. But we'd always end our garden walks with we'd sit on my grandfather's porch, and he'd have it lined with morning glories. And he'd have twine strings, and he'd have the side of the porch covered, but he'd always have a little opening so we could sit and watch cars go by. My grandmother was there too. It wasn't just my grandfather, but he was very powerful character. But he'd have stories about people driving by,
So we're going to let you finish
Yes.
that story right after the other right after the
Yes.
commercial break here,
Right.
and talk about
Stick
the
around.
importance of saving seeds now.
Okay.
We know that the government does it on some level, but we'll talk about that and also
Okay.
GMOs right after the break. You're listening to Eat, Drink, Explore. During the last segment, our guest, Diane Ott Whaley, was talking about some of the beautiful heirloom fruits and vegetables that are now photographed so wonderfully.
They're so vivid.
And we were showing some of those pictures, and you can see those online later on once you get out of the car, park safely, and then head to your computer. So
Yes.
Diane was in the middle of a story talking about seed saving and where she got her inspiration from her grandparents and these beautiful morning glories, and sitting on the porch there in Iowa. I imagine it was in Iowa.
It was in Iowa.
Yes, and we had to interrupt you because we had that commercial, that darn commercial was there. So what happened on the porch?
Okay, so on the porch we would sit, and my grandfather he was a very lively character, so every time anybody would drive by on the road, he'd have a story about them, like, they're late for milking, or they never stay home, or I wonder where they're going again.
Right, but you didn't hear it from
Yeah.
me.
And so anyway, I was just, it was my cozy morning glory room. So that's what I wanted in our first garden when Kent and I were going to have our first garden. So that's when we went down and asked him for the seeds. He handed us a little white pillbox full of these seeds, and he said that his parents had brought the seeds from Bavaria when they immigrated. And I had never heard that story, and suddenly I'm holding this little tiny box of seeds, a living link to my ancestors in a different country that I never thought about.
Hence the word heirloom.
Heirloom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like a piece of furniture or a piece of jewelry, except it's alive, handed down from generation to generation. So anyway, later that winter, unfortunately, he passed away. And we realized the importance of it and how often that might happen, as I mentioned. And about that same time as well, it was the introduction of hybrid seeds.
Okay.
And most gardeners, wanted something better, and so they thought hybrids were better. Why would you mess around with an old variety, drive a Model T when you could have a Cadillac? So they were like, abandoning the older varieties, and the seed companies were as well. So there was a lot of loss of genetic diversity just from commercial seed industry. A lot of larger farms were buying up smaller farms, so there was a lot of loss that way. And a lot of elderly gardeners were, moving off the farm, dying or leaving the land, and no one was there to pass the seeds on to because they weren't interested or whatever.
Yeah.
So there was a great need for this collection to start then. And that's when we started in as I said, in 1975. And then we turned our little hobby into a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
And then it was Seed Savers Exchange, and it's just been growing ever since. And the value is, a lot would have been lost. We saved a lot that would have been lost, and we don't know how much was lost, but at least. But we have 24,000 different accessions of seed.
Wow. So you are custodians of
we are the curators
living history.
of living history, yeah. But the best way, we have a seed bank in Iowa. We store part of our seeds at the seed vault in Norway at Svalbard. And then we have a backup a collection at Fort Collins, the
Is it where it's underground there?
No, underground. Well, it might be under. It's frozen storage there, but that's the government's central location for seed preservation.
I was going to
in
ask
Fort
about
Collins.
that if you work in conjunction.
Right. So we're not keeping all of our eggs in one basket, all of our seeds in one seed bank.
Yeah.
But the best way to get the seeds really grow. Saved is to have it growing again in people's gardens.
Right.
And it's so beautiful. I mean, you can have it add diversity to your garden, which adds diversity to our landscape as well.
But you help to keep it alive.
Yeah.
Seems like there's more color in the heirloom varieties. I don't know what it is about that.
Right.
Yes, there's more than a red tomato.
And character, because when you see they are not that classic, like tomatoes, for instance, they are that round red globe. When you see the heirloom, they're such they're
ugly,
gnarled,
but they're beautiful in a different way.
Yes, they are. They're thin-skinned and juicy, which is great.
Yeah,
because a lot of the commercial
aren't as flavorful.
They have to travel.
They have to travel. They have to be machine harvested. They have to have a thick skin so they can be machine harvested. And when you start breeding for all those traits, which they do need for the commercial,
the durability,
the durability factor. But as a backyard gardener, we just want to get the tomato from our garden to our table. We don't want it to ship it across. And we want it to ripen on the vine, not off the vine. We want it to be
sweeter, more flavorful that way.
Yeah, because it has, and the varieties are adapted, the heirloom varieties. And the other seed that I got from my grandparents was the German pink tomato.
Oh.
And it's a lovely, lovely fruit, but it's been growing now in northeast Iowa for over 100 years. Wow. So that seed has seen a lot of climate changes.
Yeah.
Right.
Adapted to a lot of pests. So it's a very hardy, sturdy survivor.
Diane, I'm wondering, in 1975 when you started, you were sort of on the fringe of things.
Right.
And now, as anyone knows, everything's about local, seasonal, sustainable, all that kind of stuff.
And heirloom is very trendy.
Yes.
Heirloom's super, they put it in front of everything now.
I
so
know.
that must be a little irritating.
It's a little frustrating. Yeah, because it's more like it's gourmet. It's like, adding value to something, which is good. I mean, heirloom that's an adjective used to add value, to make you feel good about it. But a true heirloom for us, of course, is a seed that's open pollinated, one that you can save the seed from year to year. A hybrid you could not save the seed from. And it has to be, and it has a story with it, a history. It's been handed down from generation to generation. And when you see heirloom tomato, I mean, that was in the movie The Kids Are All Right.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
yeah.
They said,
Right.
if I hear heirloom tomato one more time, I'm going to throw up.
Yeah, right.
You know what's funny about that is there's so many things along those lines right now, like local, locavore,
sustainable,
green,
all of those things.
all those things. Anytime a word gets sort of a consumer power charge to it, then everyone jumps on board and uses it, and sometimes it's too bad because the
It kind of
true
dilutes
movement
Right.
gets kind of pushed down a little.
Because it's really a menu item word now. Like you will go into restaurants and then heirloom this, heirloom that.
Yeah.
So
I was in Chicago a couple years ago walking down Michigan Avenue, and I saw a sign on the street that said heirloom tomato salad. So I walked in. It really wasn't fair, but I asked the waiter, what's an heirloom tomato?
They had no idea who they were dealing with.
yeah, right.
And he said, I don't really know. I think it's green. And I thought, well, at least he knew it was different than a red tomato.
Right. Okay.
He was on the right
He
track.
was on the right track. But
Awesome.
education, is so important in every line of work. And I think that's what we, as a nonprofit, we're focused on educating and getting the seed, as I said, in people's gardens again, and making them become seed savers. It's not hard to be a seed saver. We have all this seed here because our ancestors saved it.
So as being part of the Seed Saver Exchange, at the end here, can you sort of summarize what our listeners can do, how they can sort of jump on board with your movement?
Yeah, it's really easy and it's fun. You can join Seed Savers, and we have a web seedsavers.org, and that will have all the information about our projects and if they'd like to join. But if you're not ready to be a member of Seed Savers Exchange, we have our catalog that we send out to anyone who is interested in trying an heirloom variety. So we have about 500 different varieties that anyone can just try.
Yeah, and just by growing them in your yard, you're helping.
Yeah, and like lettuce and tomato and beans are easy. They're self-pollinating seeds, so you can save the seed easily from year to year. But you have to start with open pollinated heirloom varieties. to save the seed from, because hybrids you couldn't save the seed because
Right,
it
it
would
doesn't-
revert
it
back to
doesn't-
one or the other.
And then in about 15 seconds, your speech today is at the Grange Hall
Right.
in San Luis
yes,
Obispo.
Yes, it is. And I have seeds from our organization that I'm sharing in a seed swap. I'm going to be talking about our work. And Gathering is a book that I wrote about the history.
Oh,
of
awesome.
and you'll be signing copies of that?
Yes. And
Fan-
it's the whole story of extreme seed saving.
All right, Diane.
What time is the speech?
Oh, yes.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay,
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Diane Ott
Yes.
Whaley, seedsavers.org. Thank you,
Yes,
Diane.
Thank you.